The morning sun barely brushed the rooftops of a forgotten neighborhood tucked somewhere in a quiet corner of Ohio when a little girl with wide, sorrowful eyes took her place on the sidewalk. She held a piece of torn cardboard in both hands, the message written in shaky black letters, "Boone Good Dog $50 or best offer." Sitting obediently at her side was Boone, a German shepherd with steady, knowing eyes, as if he understood this wasn't just another morning. Maggie Sloan, just 10 years old, stood tall, trying to act older than she was. But inside, something was breaking. Boone, her best friend and only source of comfort, seemed to sense the weight Maggie carried. He sat quietly, watching the passing cars as if one of them might take him, and maybe, just maybe, take the pain with him. The neighborhood was too quiet for a Thursday morning. There were no sounds coming from inside the small house behind her. No radio, no TV, no smell of breakfast in the air. The silence didn't feel peaceful, it felt like grief. That silence was broken by the deep rumble of a Harley-Davidson engine. Cal Jensen, a man with a beard shaped by time and eyes weathered by war, rode down the street without much thought. He didn't plan to stop. But when he saw the girl, the dog, and the cardboard sign, something inside him said, "Slow down." He coasted to the curb, shut off the bike, and studied the scene. Boone stared back at him. Cal stepped off the bike, knelt beside the dog, and reached out his hand. Boone lifted his paw and gently placed it in Cal's palm. "He's a good dog," Cal said softly, mostly to himself. Maggie nodded, saying nothing at first. Her face stayed calm, but her eyes couldn't hide the fear beneath. When Cal asked why she was selling the dog, her voice came out barely above a whisper, like a secret she didn't want to say out loud. "Sir, the dog's for my mom. She hasn't eaten in 2 days." Cal froze. Her words hit him like a gut punch. He glanced back at the small house. Drawn curtains, closed windows, and a heaviness in the air that told a story without words. This wasn't just a girl selling her dog. It was a quiet cry for help. And something deep inside Cal told him he couldn't just ride away. He reached for his wallet, but didn't hand over the cash. Behind him, at the far end of the street, 2 more motorcycles approached. Cal didn't need to look. He already knew who it was. And in that moment, without saying a word, the 3 men would soon realize. The truth behind that cardboard sign was far more than anyone could have imagined. The 2 motorcycles rolled to a stop behind Cal's, their engines cutting through the morning stillness like thunder before a storm. Red McCall swung one leg over his seat and stood, his red flannel shirt flapping lightly in the breeze. Behind him, Hank Dobbs pulled off his riding gloves and looked down the street, instantly reading the situation like a cop still in uniform. Both men had been riding with Cal long enough to know, when he stopped like this, something was wrong. Maggie clutched Boone's leash a little tighter. She didn't know these men, but Boone didn't growl. That told her something. Dogs know things people don't. Cal stepped aside, giving Red and Hank a better look. Boone stood calmly, but his ears perked as if he sensed the rising energy in the air. The silence between them stretched until Maggie, barely able to keep her voice from shaking, said softly, "I'm not trying to trick anybody. He's really a good dog." Hank crouched in front of her, careful not to make sudden moves. "We believe you, sweetheart. We just want to understand what's going on." His voice was low, gentle, with the kind of patience that only comes from years of breaking through fear. Maggie blinked hard, her lips parting like she wanted to say something else, but instead, she just looked back at the house. That one look told Hank more than words could. Red followed her gaze. The windows were still closed. The front steps cracked. The porch light was still on, though the sun was already high. He crossed his arms and muttered, "This ain't right." He looked to Cal. "You talked to anyone inside?" Cal shook his head. "She said her mom hasn't eaten in 2 days. House looks sealed up. No noise, no movement. And the girl's been out here for who knows how long, trying to sell this dog." Boone sat back down beside Maggie, gently nudging her hand with his nose. It was like he was asking her not to cry. Hank stood, rubbing his jaw. "We should check inside, carefully, just to make sure her mother's okay." Cal hesitated. He'd seen situations spiral fast, and the last thing he wanted was to scare the girl or violate anyone's space. But something inside him, some gut instinct sharpened by years in uniform, told him Maggie wasn't exaggerating. She was barely hanging on. And if they waited too long, they might regret it. Maggie didn't protest. She just nodded, slowly, her eyes never leaving the front door. "She sleeps a lot now," she said. "Even when I talk to her. Sometimes she doesn't answer right away." The words sent a chill down Cal's spine. The three men exchanged a look, unspoken but clear. They needed to act now. And as Cal stepped toward the porch, Boone suddenly stood up, his ears rising, focused, watching, like he knew what they were about to find inside wasn't what any of them were prepared for. The porch creaked under Cal's boots as he stepped up, followed closely by Hank and Red. Maggie stayed behind, clutching Boone's leash, her small frame nearly swallowed by the weight of everything she was trying to carry alone. Cal paused at the front door. Its white paint was chipped, the knob slightly rusted. He knocked gently at first. Nothing. Then again louder. Still silence. Only the low hum of a distant lawn mower filled the air. "I don't like this," Red muttered. His voice was tight, eyes scanning the windows for any movement. Hank reached out and tried the doorknob. Unlocked. He looked at Cal, silently asking for the go-ahead. Cal nodded. The door opened with a quiet groan, revealing a stale, heavy air that rushed out like a wave. The smell hit them immediately, not rot, but sickness. Like sweat, old food, and something else. Something empty. They stepped inside cautiously. The living room was dim, even with the daylight creeping in through the cracks in the blinds. A worn-out sofa sat in the middle of the room, a thin blanket crumpled on one side. Next to it, a small folding table held a nearly empty water bottle and a bottle of aspirin. Cal's eyes moved to a pair of worn slippers on the floor, positioned neatly, too neatly, as if untouched for days. Red moved toward the kitchen. The fridge door hung slightly open. Inside, barely anything. A half carton of milk, some wilted lettuce, and one slice of bread in a bag. "There's nothing here," Red said quietly, shaking his head. Hank walked toward the hallway. "Let's check the bedroom." Boone, still outside, whined low. Maggie sat beside him on the porch steps, staring at the open door, waiting. Not with fear, but with something worse. Resignation. The hallway was narrow, and at the end of it, the bedroom door was shut. Hank knocked. "Ma'am? It's okay. We're just here to help." No answer. He slowly opened the door. The room was dark, curtains drawn, but there was enough light to see her. Claire Sloan, Maggie's mother, was lying on the bed, turned toward the wall, a thin sheet covering her body. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Hank stepped closer. "Ma'am," he said again gently. Claire stirred. Her voice came out dry and distant. "Is she okay?" The question was barely audible. Cal stepped forward. "She's fine. She's outside with the dog." Claire didn't turn around. "I didn't want her to know," she whispered. "I thought I could hold on a little longer." That was when Cal saw the truth. Claire wasn't just tired or malnourished. Her skin was pale, her frame too thin, and her breath shallow. This wasn't just poverty, this was illness. Something serious. And she had been hiding it not for her sake, but for Maggie's. And as Boone let out a long, low whine from the porch, the men inside the room felt it too. This story had only just begun. Claire's eyes remained on the wall, unfocused. Her breathing was shallow, but steady. Cal pulled a wooden chair from the corner and sat beside the bed, the floorboards creaking under his weight. Red stayed in the doorway while Hank quietly stepped back, giving them space. The room smelled faintly of lavender and sickness, like someone had tried to cover something up, but time and pain had worn through the effort. Cal didn't speak at first. He just waited. Sometimes silence said more than words. "I didn't want her to see me like this," Claire whispered. Her voice was like paper, dry and fragile. "She's just a kid. She shouldn't have to carry this." Her eyes finally shifted, just enough to meet Cal's. There was a glint of old strength there, buried under layers of exhaustion. I've been keeping it from her for months, telling her I was just tired, that things would get better soon. Cal nodded slowly. He'd seen this kind of strength before, in the eyes of soldiers, single mothers, and people who'd already accepted the battle was lost. What is it, Claire? He asked gently. What are you really fighting? She hesitated, then swallowed hard. Pancreatic cancer. Stage 4. They found it too late. No insurance. I tried clinics, church groups, but there's only so long you can hold things together with duct tape and prayers. The weight of her words fell heavy in the room. Red shifted his stance in the doorway, his arms crossed tight over his chest. He muttered something under his breath, maybe a curse, maybe a prayer. Cal leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. You were trying to protect her, he said softly. But she knew something was wrong. That's why she was out there. Claire blinked, a tear slipping down her cheek. Boone's all we have. And I told her, if things got bad, we might have to let him go. I never thought she'd actually do it. Outside, Maggie sat quietly with Boone, stroking his ears, unaware of the quiet storm unraveling just inside. Hank had joined her, sitting on the steps, asking her gentle questions about school, about her favorite food, about Boone. She answered politely, but her voice was distant, like she'd learned to speak without really being heard. Hank recognized that tone. He'd heard it in kids from homes where love was present, but buried under fear. Back inside, Cal stood. We're not leaving, he said. Not until we figure something out. Claire looked up at him, surprised. Why? She asked. You don't even know us. Cal met her gaze, steady and sure. Because no one should be this alone, especially not a kid. Claire turned her face toward the window, the light creeping through the blinds, landing on the tear tracing down her cheek. And in that moment, with the room filled with quiet resolve, none of them noticed the faded envelope sticking out from under the dresser, marked with a name that hadn't been spoken in years, Eli Sloan. Red's boot tapped the edge of the envelope sticking out from under the dresser. He leaned down with a grunt, picking it up carefully like it might crumble in his hands. The paper was yellowed, corners bent, but the ink was still clear. The name on the front made him pause, Eli Sloan. He turned toward Cal. You know this name? Cal glanced at Claire. Her face had gone still, her expression unreadable. She tried to sit up, but the effort took too much out of her. Where did you find that? She asked, her voice sharp and suddenly alert. Red held the envelope between two fingers. It was half buried under the dresser. Looks like it's been here a while. Claire looked away, her lips pressing into a tight line. I didn't know Maggie ever found that. I thought I'd thrown it away. Cal approached slowly, sitting back down beside her. Who is he? Claire stared at the ceiling for a long moment before answering. Her father, Eli. He left when she was 2. Said he needed time to figure himself out. Never came back. Her voice was flat, rehearsed, as if she'd told herself the same story for years to keep the truth from cutting too deep. Last I heard, he was somewhere in Kentucky. Or maybe Tennessee. I stopped looking. Red, never good at holding his tongue, muttered, Figures. But Cal didn't flinch. He just looked at Claire and asked, Why keep the letter? She closed her eyes as if ashamed. Because part of me thought, if I ever got sick, if I couldn't take care of her anymore, maybe I'd need him to step up. I just never thought it would actually come to that. Outside, Boone's ears perked up. Maggie was still petting him, but her eyes were fixed on the doorway now, sensing the shift in energy inside. Hank watched her carefully. You ever talk about your dad? He asked. Maggie shrugged. I don't remember him. Mama said he left to go find something. I used to think he was looking for treasure or something like in the movies. Her voice faded. But I guess he just didn't want to be here. Inside the bedroom, Cal folded the envelope and tucked it into his jacket pocket. We might be able to track him down, he said. If there's a chance, any chance, that he could help, it's worth trying. Claire's eyes fluttered open again. I don't want her to hate him, she whispered. But I don't want her to hope for something that may never come either. Cal stood slowly, She deserves the truth. We'll handle it one step at a time. As he walked toward the door, Boone let out a soft bark. Just once. Like he knew something was about to change. And as Cal stepped back onto the porch, a cold wind picked up, rustling the trees, and for the first time since the morning began, Maggie looked up and asked, "Did something happen?" Cal sat beside Maggie on the porch steps, the letter from her father heavy in his jacket pocket. Boone rested his head on her knee, sensing her unease. The question still lingered in the air. Did something happen? Cal glanced toward the door, where Claire lay resting again, then back at the girl. He could lie. It would be easier. But something about Maggie, her eyes too wise for her age, the way she tried to sell her best friend to keep her mother alive, made him realize she deserved better. He exhaled slowly. "Yeah," he said. "Something did happen." She didn't flinch, just waited. "Your mom's sick, Maggie. Really sick. And she's been trying to protect you from it." Maggie looked down at Boone, her small fingers curling into his fur. "I knew something was wrong. She sleeps too much, and sometimes she cries in the bathroom, real quiet. I thought maybe she was just sad, like missing someone." Her voice cracked, but she didn't cry. Not yet. Red stood near the porch rail, watching the road, pretending not to listen, though he heard every word. Hank was inside talking with Claire, trying to understand her condition better, how long she might have, what kind of care she'd refused, and what it would take to get her into a hospital. None of the answers were encouraging. Cal hesitated, then pulled the envelope from his jacket and held it out. Maggie stared at it like it might burn her hands. "It's from your dad," Cal said quietly. "We found it under the dresser." She took it slowly, holding it with both hands. Her thumb ran along the edge. "He left when I was little," she murmured. "Mama said he needed time." Cal nodded. "That's what she told us. She wasn't trying to lie, just trying to protect your heart." Maggie looked up, her voice barely above a whisper. "Is he coming back?" Cal didn't answer right away. "We don't know, but we're gonna try and find him." Back inside, Claire had drifted into a light sleep. Hank came out to the porch, his face tight. "She's worse than she lets on," he said quietly to Cal. "We don't have weeks." Red finally turned. "Then what the hell are we waiting for? We've got names, a state, and a last known address. We can ride." Cal looked at Maggie, who was still staring at the letter. "She shouldn't be alone," he said. Hank nodded. "One of us stays behind. The others go." Maggie finally looked up again. "If he's out there, if he's really out there, do you think he'll come?" Cal met her gaze, and for the first time he let her see the weight he carried too. "I don't know," he said honestly. "But some roads are worth riding, even if you don't know what's waiting at the end." And as Red pulled out a map and laid it across the porch bench, the road ahead began to unfold. Not just in miles, but in memories, pain, and maybe redemption. The next morning came with a pale gray sky and a cold breeze that seemed to cut through the silence of the neighborhood. Boone paced near the porch, restless, sensing change. Inside, Claire was too weak to get out of bed, her breathing shallower now, her hands trembling even at rest. Maggie sat beside her, brushing her mother's hair back gently, her small fingers barely able to hide the fear. "I'll be okay, Mama," she whispered, though no one had asked her to be. "I'll take care of Boone, and I won't be scared." Out on the driveway, Cal tightened the saddlebags on his bike. Red and Hank were checking the route again. Back roads through Kentucky, small towns where Eli Sloan might have passed through or left a trail. The last known address was in a faded corner of a town called Barlow, barely a dot on the map. No phone number, no digital footprint. It was like chasing a ghost. But Cal had chased ghosts before, and sometimes they showed up. "I don't like leaving the girl," Red muttered, zipping his worn-out leather jacket. "She's strong, but she's still just a kid." Hank nodded. "I'll stay. Someone's got to watch over Claire and make sure Maggie doesn't carry this alone." Cal looked over at the porch, where Maggie stood holding Boone's leash, her face pale but set with quiet determination. "You sure?" he asked Hank. "Yeah," he replied. You ride. I'll hold the fort. Maggie walked up to Cal as he mounted his bike. She reached into her hoodie pocket and pulled out the letter from Eli, creased now, but still unopened. She handed it to him without a word. He took it gently, understanding the weight behind the gesture. If you find him, she said, just tell him, I'm not mad. I just want to know if he remembers me. Her voice was steady, but her eyes shimmered. Cal nodded, pressing the envelope into his jacket pocket like it was a mission order. As the engines roared to life, Boone barked once. Sharp and loud, like a soldier sending off his commander. The neighbors peeked through their curtains, watching the two bikes roll down the street and vanish into the misty morning. Back on the porch, Maggie sat down beside Hank, her legs swinging off the edge. Do you think they'll find him? She asked. Hank didn't answer right away. He looked out at the empty road, then down at the girl beside him. I don't know, he said. But Cal's not the kind of man who gives up easy. And as the sun pushed slowly through the clouds, casting light over cracked pavement and worn fences, a long journey had begun. Not just through miles of highway, but through years of silence, regret, and the fragile hope of a child waiting to be remembered. The road into Barlow was cracked and narrow, lined with faded gas stations and shuttered storefronts. Cal and Red rode in silence, the wind loud in their ears, but their thoughts louder. Every mile closer brought more weight. Cal reached into his jacket more than once, his fingers brushing the edge of the envelope like it was a compass. They didn't know if Eli Sloan would be at the end of this road, but they couldn't afford not to find out. They stopped at a rundown diner on the edge of town, the kind of place where locals gathered for coffee and gossip. Inside, the air smelled of bacon grease and strong coffee. A waitress named Norma, maybe in her 60s, greeted them with a wary smile. You boys ain't from around here, she said, pouring them both coffee before they even asked. Cal pulled the envelope from his jacket and slid it across the counter. You ever know a man named Eli Sloan? She stared at the name, and her smile faded. Norma hesitated, then glanced around before leaning in. He worked construction. Tall guy, quiet. Came through about 2 years ago. Stayed for a bit. Got mixed up with the wrong folks, far as I heard. Cal's jaw tightened. Where'd he go? She shrugged. Might still be in town, or just outside of it. There's a trailer park down by the quarry. Folks come and go. You might get lucky. Red nodded. We'll try our luck. Back home, Maggie sat in her mother's room, holding Claire's hand. The silence between them had grown heavier over the past day, filled with unsaid fears. Claire was awake but weak, her eyes cloudy with pain. You don't have to stay here all day, baby, she whispered. You should be outside. With Boone. Maggie shook her head. He's at the door. He doesn't want to leave either. Claire managed a faint smile. That dog's too loyal for his own good. Then Maggie reached into her pocket and pulled out the drawing she'd made days before. Boone, her mom, and her, standing in front of their house, smiling. She placed it gently on the nightstand. We're gonna be okay, right? She asked, her voice fragile. Claire didn't answer immediately. Instead, she turned her head toward the window, where the light filtered through the blinds like a fading memory. I hope so, baby, she whispered. I really do. Back in Barlow, Cal and Red reached the trailer park just as the sun began to dip low on the horizon. A dog barked in the distance. A woman with tired eyes pointed them toward Lot 6. There's a guy there, she said. Keeps to himself. Might be who you're looking for. Cal parked the bike and stepped toward the trailer, heart pounding. Red stood back, watching. And as Cal raised his hand to knock, he saw the name on the mailbox. Sloan. They'd found him. But would he open the door? The knock echoed dully against the thin metal door of the trailer. For a long moment, there was nothing. No movement. No reply. Cal waited, fists clenched at his sides. He could hear a TV faintly behind the walls, and then the sound of footsteps. Slow. Hesitant. The door cracked open an inch, held by a security chain. Behind it, a man's eyes appeared. Tired, sunken, and suspicious. Yeah? The voice asked. Cal kept his tone calm. You Eli Sloan? The man's eyes narrowed. He looked at Cal's face, then passed him to Red, standing by the bikes. Who's the skin? Cal pulled the letter from his jacket and held it up. I came on behalf of your daughter, Maggie. The name hit like a hammer. The door closed for a second, then the chain slid loose and it opened again. Eli Sloan stepped out slowly. He looked older than his years, his frame thin and his shoulders hunched from whatever life had done to him. I didn't know I didn't think she'd even remember me, Eli muttered, his voice raw. Cal watched him carefully. She remembers. And her mother's dying. That last word seemed to knock the wind out of him. Eli sat down heavily on the steps of the trailer. Is it cancer? He asked. Cal nodded. Pancreatic. Stage 4. She kept it from everyone. Maggie's been taking care of her the best she can. Eli rubbed his face with both hands, then looked up. And you? You're just what? Some guy who found them. I'm a friend, Cal said simply. And Maggie doesn't have time for you to figure out if you're ready to be a father. Eli didn't argue. He just stared at the letter in Cal's hand. That hers. Cal handed it to him. Eli didn't open it. He just held it like something sacred or maybe radioactive. I don't know if I deserve to go back there, he whispered. You probably don't, Red said, stepping closer. But that ain't the point. Back in Ohio, the house was quiet. Too quiet. Maggie sat on the floor of her mother's room. Boone curled up beside her. Claire hadn't spoken much since morning. Her breathing was thinner now, like every inhale was being borrowed from somewhere far away. Maggie held her mother's hand, but the warmth was fading. Mama, she whispered. You can rest now. I'll be okay. Boone lifted his head, ears alert, as if he knew the air had changed. Then he let out a soft, aching whimper. Eli looked at Cal, the trailer park suddenly colder. Can we make it in time? He asked. Cal put a hand on his shoulder. We'll ride fast, but you need to be ready for whatever's waiting. Eli stood, pocketing the letter. His hands trembled. Let's go. And as the engines roared back to life under a falling sun, one question remained in the wind between them. Would forgiveness be waiting on the other side of that road? The tires of Cal's motorcycle crunched against the gravel as they pulled into the driveway just after sunrise. The sky was brushed with soft pinks and golds, like a quiet blessing. Eli stepped off the back of the bike, unsteady. He looked at the small, weathered house with its peeling paint and crooked porch steps. Everything was still. Cal killed the engine. Boone was the first to appear, standing alert by the screen door, tail wagging slowly, cautiously, as if sensing the change. Hank opened the door a moment later, his face pale and heavy. He gave Cal a subtle nod, then turned to Eli. She passed about an hour ago, he said quietly. Peaceful. Maggie was with her. Eli took a breath, but nothing came out. His knees buckled slightly, and he sat on the porch step, burying his face in his hands. For a long time, no one spoke. Even Boone stayed quiet, resting his head on Eli's knee like he somehow understood the weight of everything that had been lost, and what was still left to fight for. Inside, Maggie sat beside her mother's bed, the blanket pulled up neatly. Her small hand still rested over Claire's. She didn't cry. Not yet. Her eyes were fixed on the window, where the sun's first rays were warming the floor. When Cal stepped into the room, she looked up. Then, behind him, she saw him. Eli. He stepped into the doorway like a man crossing a frozen lake, afraid every step might crack open the past. She stared at him. He stared back. And for a few seconds, the world stood still. Then Maggie spoke. You came. Eli nodded, his voice breaking. I should have come sooner. I was lost. She blinked, her voice barely above a whisper. I know. He stepped closer. I read your letter. He reached into his coat and pulled out a folded drawing. Boone, Maggie, and Claire. You gave this to Cal. It's beautiful. Maggie looked down. It was supposed to be all of us. Eli knelt in front of her. Maybe it still can be. That afternoon, The house filled with quiet visitors. Neighbors bringing casseroles, hugs, silence. Claire's body was taken with dignity, and Boone never left Maggie's side. Later, as the sun began to dip again, Cal sat on the porch alone while Red and Hank packed up. Eli joined him, sitting in the same place where Maggie once held the cardboard sign. "I don't know how to make it right," Eli said. Cal stared at the road. "You start by showing up tomorrow. Then the day after that." In the fading light, Maggie stepped onto the porch. Boone followed. She looked at Eli. "We don't have to pretend," she said softly. "But you can stay." Eli stood slowly, uncertain. Then Maggie reached for his hand, and he took it. And as the sun disappeared behind the trees, one chapter ended, and another, quiet, uncertain, but full of possibility, finally began.